Get Sharp. I am Fortenbaugh of the National Football Post, joined today by my man Todd Fuhrman, Senior Racing Sports Analyst from Caesars Entertainment. We're here in the Sportsbook at Caesars Palace, and we're going to get ready to preview the three biggest games on the college football schedule this weekend. Mr. Twitter, it is great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate being included in the process. I've watched the videos since the start of the season. Really enjoyed the content. Hopefully I can do the same for the guests.
That sounds rehearsed, but I'll take it anytime, and we're going to make sure that we pump that up to the beginning of the episode. Let's start with the big one in the SEC. Number 3 Alabama 4-0 travels to Gainesville to take on number 4 Florida, also 4-0 at 8 p.m. This is a matchup everyone looks forward to every single year. Florida opens as a 5-point underdog with a total at 45.5. The line has since come down a little bit depending on where you look. Alabama's a 4-point favorite heading into this one. You take a look at this game, obviously there's going to be a ton of public action. There's going to be a lot of people that are interested in watching this game.
No question about it.
Where do you see this thing closing? Where do you see it moving to once everyone has their fill on Saturday?
Right now, to be completely honest, we pretty much anticipated that we see nothing but Alabama money coming in, but oddly enough, we've seen good two-way action so far in the Gators. First true test for Florida right now. I know they played host to Tennessee, but the Volunteers defense isn't anywhere close to the caliber they'll encounter with Alabama. Will Muschamp going to be under the microscope for this game, along with Charlie Weiss. The big question is, can they get the ball to Dempsey and Rainey in space? Alabama's front four not quite nearly as good as their back seven on the defensive side of the ball. It'll be awfully interesting to see if Florida's up for the challenge and can really make a statement and announce the ushering in of a new regime with a resounding win over Alabama.
Do you buy into the hype at all that Muschamp and Weiss have kept their offense somewhat vanilla leading into this game? Because they've got Alabama this week, they got LSU next week. A lot of people think they haven't showed all their cards in preparation for these two games.
I think they may have scaled back some of the game planning, but the game against Tennessee, they had to go out there and showcase some of their playbook and at least tip their hand, for their first SEC showdown. The biggest question in the matchup I think that people fail to look at in this game isn't necessarily Florida's offense against Alabama's defense. It's the other way around. How will Florida's defense, with a ton of experience and a ton of speed, match up with a relatively inexperienced Alabama offense? They have traveled to Happy Valley, had a game where they dismantled Penn State, who I don't really see as a real threat.
I went to school there, easy. Just easy on all your dismantling.
Don't see them as a real threat in the SEC, but this is going to be up to McCarron and Trent Richardson to take this game over and find space against this Florida defense. I think it's one of the most intriguing matchups of the early season, and I wish I had an idea how it was going to end to book it accordingly.
Alabama 7-1-1 against the spread in the last 9 versus Florida. Why would the opening line move towards the Gators, though? Do you think the early guys that got in on this like the Gators at home getting the points?
I think anytime you talk about an NFL-style game with a low total, anytime you go over 4 points, that's a big helpful advantage to the player looking to bet on the underdog. Number opened as high as 5, so bet down to 3.5 in some shops. You're talking about key numbers for a game that could fall 21-17, somewhere in that ballpark. This is a Florida team who's going to have revenge on their minds. The question is, do they have the playmakers, and are they ready to step up and announce their authority within the SEC?
Earlier in the day, at noon, number 14 Texas A&M, 2-1, coming off a come-from-ahead loss against Oklahoma State last weekend, devastating to the national championship hopes. We'll get to that in a second. At number 18, Arkansas, also 3-1. Excuse me, they're 3-1. Texas A&M 2-1. They're also coming off a loss as well. This game opens with Texas A&M as a 3.5-point favorite. It's since come down to about Texas A&M right around 3. Total, though, in this one jumps from 59.5 to 62 with a little time left before kickoff. You take a look at this game, I think the big question is Texas A&M, big lead at home last week in a marquee matchup against Oklahoma State. This was supposed to be the coming out party for the national title picture. They lose 30-29. Can they get up for this game?
You saw a team in Texas A&M who built a 20-3 lead against a very good Oklahoma State 1 week ago. Absolutely implode in that second half. Ryan Tannehill showed some ill effects that we haven't seen from him since his game against LSU in the bowl, where they were clearly outclassed in last year's Cotton Bowl. This is an A&M team under Mike Sherman who hasn't fared well off of a loss. Devastating, like you alluded to, in terms of the national championship picture. They step out of conference for a rivalry game. They do have revenge from last year where Arkansas beat them 24-17. But I think Coach Petrino can let his troops know that, hey, we ran into a buzzsaw in Alabama. You guys shouldn't be discouraged. And despite the loss of both defensive ends, I really think Arkansas comes in with a huge emotional edge in this contest. And it'll be interesting to see. We'll know within the first 10 minutes if A&M's going to get off the mat or they're going to mail in this contest against against Arkansas.
Arkansas 7-2 against the spread in the last 9 versus the Big 12, so that might be one of the reasons why you're starting to see some people early on, like the SEC team at home. They have had some success against this conference. Let's talk about the total for a second. It goes up early on, a little over 2 points at the beginning of the week. What do you see there? You think a lot of people think this thing's going to be a shootout? You got two good quarterbacks.
I think this is a game where you're going to see the offenses open up a little bit. Two teams coming off losses. Defense may be down a little bit for what they had to go through 1 week ago. But two defensive units that are much maligned. They're not going to provide the same stiff resistance that both groups encountered 1 week ago. And I think you'll see a wide open game plan. It's fun. It's a non-conference atmosphere. And a lot of these college kids want to take full advantage of a chance to showcase their talents at Jerry World. The one thing that may slow things down a little bit is an early kickoff. So it'll be awfully interesting to see how those two teams respond.
Where do you think the number closes in this one once the public has their way with it Saturday morning?
I think when you talk about an over-under sitting at 62, the next key number that factors in is 63 in that equation. I think if it were to climb that high or maybe even tick over the 63.5, you start to see buyback in the marketplace and a little bit of resistance. At this point now, awfully tough to make a strong case for the under. Two high-profile offenses with two very talented and underrated quarterbacks.
Final game up for discussion. Big Ten homers of the world unite as number 8 Nebraska, in their first Big Ten showdown since joining the conference, travels to number 7 4-0 Wisconsin and Russell Wilson, the new quarterback from NC State. Both teams undefeated in this matchup. Line opens with Wisconsin right around an 8-point favorite. Right now holding steady right about the same spot. Wisconsin -9, depending on where you look at it. Two big teams, two huge fan bases in this one. Where do you see everyone getting down on this one? Because you know what, it could go either way. Both teams are monsters.
The Big Ten did Nebraska 0 favors in setting up their Big Ten schedule with their opener, going to Wisconsin at Camp Randall, one of the toughest environments to play at anywhere in the conference. Russell Wilson right now has to be considered amongst the favorite for the Heisman Trophy this season. His numbers have been off the charts, albeit against a little softer competition than what Wisconsin will encounter throughout the course of the Big Ten schedule. But this is a Nebraska defense right now that has been much maligned. They played a little better in Laramie 1 week ago against Wyoming, but still gave up over 400 yards at home to Fresno State and Washington. This is their first true test, and I'm not sure this is the same edition of the black shirts we've seen. The number actually opened at -7 offshore. We've seen the public come in and bet it up, and I think rightfully so. I thought the number should be between that 10, maybe 11 range. I think the total may be a touch low at 56, given the offensive capabilities of these two teams. The only spread offense that Wisconsin faced was UNLV, a game that looked a little misleading on paper, but the Rebels were able to move the football consistently with a running quarterback. I think Taylor Martinez may find it a little easier sledding during game time than what people perceive this as on paper.
Wisconsin 7-0-1 against the spread in their last 8 home games, so it's certainly going to be a tough challenge. The one thing that stands out to me about Wisconsin, I watched a lot of NC State last year. Russell Wilson has trouble protecting the football. Like you said, definitely a Heisman candidate right now. Early in the season, he's done a great job against decent competition, not great. This is going to be his first chance. How do you see him performing in this one?
I think the biggest thing is that Coach Bielema is going to have to find a way to establish the ground game. You're going to see a steady dose of Wisconsin pounding the football to set up the play-action pass. I mean, Russell Wilson last year at NC State, he knew he was under full frontal assault every time. Coach O'Brien hasn't been able to run the ball down there in Raleigh for the last 2 years. So imagine this takes a weight off of Russell Wilson's shoulders, knowing that, hey, we can run the football consistently, and they're not going to be able to blitz me from all angles throughout the course of the game. I really think it's interesting to see how Wisconsin chooses to approach it. It's not all the time you get a veteran quarterback playing in this type of environment. Don't be surprised if Wilson comes out and slings the ball 30, 35 times as they try and open up this Nebraska team and use the pass to actually set up the run.
Remember, Ohio State went up to Camp Randall last year and got absolutely smoked. This is not an easy place to win a football game, especially if you're coming in on the road. That wraps it up for this edition of Get Sharp, everybody. My man Todd Fuhrman, senior race and sports analyst from Caesars Entertainment, here at the fabulous sportsbook at Caesars Palace. I'm Joe Fortenbaugh. We'll see you next time.